Hangout is live. Okay. Well, this is Marlon Barrio Solano, and we are here in the second hangout of this Meta Academy of the summer 2014, in which we have been very lucky to kind of take this leap into with Columbus, Ohio, with this a program called Taking Place, and we have two choreographers with us, Claire Porter and Coco Loupe, and that's how I say it, isn't it? Is it correct? Coco Loupe.
You can say it however you want to, Marlon.
Okay. Hi, Coco. And and the main idea is to have a conversation, and hopefully we will have other participants of the Meta Academy join. That can happen, that people start kind of popping in. And so the main thing is to have a conversation about choreographic practices, what also, how is your process, and give us a little bit, bit of.
This is Fabio Solano, and we are here in the second hangout of.
There's a little bit of feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got. It happened the last time too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
remember when it started looping back.
We have been very lucky to kind of take this.
I'm just going to mute.
With Columbus, Ohio, which is
everybody.
And we have
Lisa,
choreographers, Claire Porter.
Okay, let me just.
Is it mine? What should I do?
Correct.
I am.
Mute your microphone, Lisa. There you go.
Yes. Yeah. So. Okay.
So and the main idea is to have a conversation, and hopefully we will have.
I muted Lisa.
Yeah.
Okay. So it seems like that was the source. Okay, this has happened. That happened when we have a window open that has the broadcast on. Okay. So yes. So let's just go back to Taking Place, and Nicole, please take it away.
They have to unmute. I'm going to unmute them.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
All right. Great.
There you go.
Taking Place. Yes. Taking Place is Taking Place.
Now he's looping again.
With Columbus, Ohio, which is.
I mute Lisa again.
Lisa, if you wear headphones, it'll take that feedback away.
Yeah. Thank you, Josephine. Okay.
So yeah, we're halfway through the Taking Place project in Columbus. Claire Porter got here last night. Coco's been here a couple of days. KJ and Peter have been here almost a week. Yeah. And we have the performance coming this Friday and Saturday. But more importantly, we have the process that's happening with all of these people living together and making work sort of collaboratively. We don't really know what's going to happen yet with anything. So, but we're having a really great time. We've got some awesome folks involved, and thanks for watching.
Okay. Well, thank you. And Josephine, can you introduce yourself like very quickly, just to.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Josephine Dorado. I think I know some of you, and I'm very happy to be here. I'm a co-founder along with Rachel Boja and Marlon in Meta Academy, where we did the initial project at Bates Festival last year. I'm a longtime practitioner of networked performance and telematic performance, dating back about 10 years, and as well as other types of dance tech experiences, and very much obsessed with the ideas around the combination of digital and physical presence. I'm a professor at the New School as well, and the president of the Fulbright New York chapter.
Interesting. Amazing. Hi.
Okay, so now Claire and Coco, we can just start at kind of the very first thing is perhaps this main question is like, how can we frame, with introducing a little bit ourselves, like what do we do, and how do you kind of frame your practice right now and what's going on in Columbus. And we take it from there informally, so we can go first Claire and then Coco, or vice versa, whatever you want.
So let's see. My name is Claire Porter, and I call my work Claire Porter Portables.
Mm-hmm.
And it was called Portables because I wanted to be able to do it anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But and I now combine language and movement, and I think of myself as a choreographer of language and a choreographer of movement, and merge the two. And that's what I do.
Okay. You are based in mostly New York?
Yes. I live in New Jersey, so based right around the New York area.
Okay. Great.
I'm Coco Loupe, and I am back in Columbus for this project after living here for about 10 years. And now I'm back in my home state of Louisiana and making a life for myself there as best I can. But I don't, I feel like I'm kind of in a in-between state of identity, of being a practicing artist and someone who has been an imposter for a lot of years, holding down a job that has nothing to do with a physical practice. So I feel like as much as my practice comes up for me from time to time, and I create these experiences in which I can feel like I have my natural identity emerge, which I don't know, those terms are loaded and cloudy and blurry, but I kind of come to making dances as a way to reconnect with the mystery of it and the mystery of my own self. So a lot of repetition frames my work, a lot of giving and receiving of movement. So there's a mirroring, there's a reflection between performer and maker. It's a lot of finding, a lot of re-identifying all the time, and staying curious about that. Trying to stay curious about that. What keeps me coming back? What keeps me coming out of being an imposter?
I think that's the key word, the curiosity.
Right.
I think that drives most artists they're curious. We are curious about something and investigate it in the medium we own. So we're curious about any number of subjects, and as choreographers, it's usually investigating that in movement. Mm-hmm. So keeps us on the edge of our knowledge and who we are and our knowledge of humanity and of ourselves. Would you agree?
Yeah. I think that lately too, and Claire's saying, you know, she choreographs language and movement and this crossover. I keep finding myself trying to let my body have its own, listen to the intelligence of my own body without trying to explain it verbally, without trying to put language on top of it, or just let the dancing, let the actual action of what I'm doing explain itself. But in that, also finding that that language is having, I don't know, I guess that's one of my things, is like trying to figure out where these words, these ideas are coming from, and how my body is understanding them. And trying to go between muting that and listening to it, and muting that and listening to it, between language, physicality, language, physicality. What
sounds like a purity.
Impurity?
No, a purity.
A purity.
No, taking language and embodying it, or so there's a purity to the movement. It sounds like to me.
Or the aspiration, some kind of aspiration to have, because the interesting thing of what I hear is how you can have different perspective in relation to language, where each of you may have a set of methods, certain kind of methodologies that you use to perhaps try to exercise a curiosity and also to be faithful to this idea, but the other thing that Claire pointed out is how you seem to have a freedom, a thematical freedom. It's to say, okay, I can have these methodologies and this work with language, but at the same time, I may get interested about this or that. So it's almost like I always remember a friend of mine, a philosopher. He said, the philosopher and artists are very, very close to each other, because practically you just want to think about something, and we just make that the focus of our work. And so in a way, I think that kind of is a connection between having the opportunity to thematically get interested. I also, just to frame it a little bit more, can you tell a little bit more about what you both are doing during this process, how you approach to work in such a short time, those kind of things. And then we can take it for, questions for Lisa and Eve, and take it from there. Yeah.
I'm going to start tonight in a workshop where we play with language and movement. And I will give the participants a problem that they respond to. So they end up generating the movement material, and then I shape it. So you can do that in a short amount of time. With the person generating usually can remember, and then I direct it in a way so that it stays interesting to me and hopefully to an audience. So one can do that in a short amount of time. So we won't get to rehearse for 3 months, but we can generate and play and shape an event. So there.
And I started my process here with a workshop yesterday, and just explored one of the strategies that I use called fishnetting, where I throw out material and the participants catch whatever they can, and then reformulate what the residue of what they caught into pieces of movement that I use as raw materials to then sort of let speak back to me about what the dance is going to be. So it can happen also in a fairly short amount of time, because they are essentially generating the material as well, but it's based on movement that I suggest, so I get to see a little bit of where they meet me and I meet them, so that we can have our influences both come to bear in the process and in the final work. I don't know what the work will look like, but we have the materials fairly quickly to work with, and we'll probably set up at least a structure in which those materials can ride and hang and have a structure to perform inside of. That's kind of what's happening in my new work.
I'm going to ask about music.
Music.
Music, Jolie.
So yeah, Columbus is an amazing place for independent music, and it's loaded with wonderful composers. And so normally the two composers that I work with the most are actually working with other people in the project, which is awesome to have that new crossover. So I'm going back in the archives and digging up originally composed pieces that I think will dovetail nicely with what I'm doing, but trying to use local musicians and local composers so that there is a real coalescence of what is taking place in Columbus from all different kinds of media. You?
Me? Music? The language is music. I think of that as musical accompaniment or music. And I brought some music I'd like to work with, and to overlay, depending if it works. And I often work with Guy Klusevic, who's an accordion composer out of New York, and Mary Ellen Childs, who's a composer who lives in Minneapolis. So I like to work with them and others too. So.
Okay, great. And just a tiny question to practically be fair also with what we did last week. We talk a little bit of, it's part of also of the research that we are trying to do is set perhaps a little bit of matrix of influences. So it's in kind of in the back of our head and here at Meta Academy that we may be able to kind of visualize some of the, for example, if we ask you, you know, you can name from 3 to 5 strong influences from the past and from your past, either very kind of in the beginning of your career or now, or something that is, let's say something that is influential now, but it can have like a different temporal spectrum from a long time ago or just right now that you have this book in your suitcase.
Right.
Yeah.
So my influences, Vicki Blaine, who taught choreography here, she was a major influence in terms of analyzing movement and structuring. All the Laban work, Rudolf Laban's, all his work was a major influence in how to read movement and how we're giving several ways of coming at movement. And Bessie Schoenberg was an influence. She taught choreographers in New York City, and her best advice to me, I remember, was she said, "Go hog wild." I love that. She wanted just keep going and see how far you can go. It's very exciting.
What's now? What's right now?
Influencing? I study history, human history, and I'm interested in the history of humanity. And so I'm working on a new solo that's about I'm looking at history, an individual looking at history.
Very nice. Coco.
I would have to say that Deborah Hay has been a massive influence on me since I took her. I did her solo commissioning project in Scotland in '07, and was delighted to have my world kind of blown apart by that. She completely recontextualized how to present oneself in an experience, even to oneself, and what I didn't know about at the time, but the cellular level of knowing and not knowing. So she was a huge influence on me, and Susan Rethorst, her practices. I studied with her at Bairnstow and have read her book voraciously. Her practices of treating things lightly, trying to understanding that the dance kind of comes of itself, and that one doesn't necessarily have to impose external ideas onto an emerging dance, that it can actually have its own intelligence and its own way of building itself. I still don't know how to do that or if I'm doing it or whatever, but I go to those people for information, for strategies, to, like I said earlier, to continue to find ways to see myself as I continue to return to dance over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And then right now I'm reading a lot of the books by Pema Chodron.
Uh-huh.
And her ideas about compassion and groundlessness are kind of shaking up what I expect of myself and of other people outside of the elusive art making that I'm doing. And then Murakami. His literature has always, I think my dances are always trying to make his books. But I know, I always find myself thinking, oh, this is like that scene, blah, 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 and from, Wind Up Bird or something.
Yeah.
So I think I'm always trying to re-dance his books.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so I would like to open it, to the group. If you have, any question, I think all the mics are open. I just want to point out this really interesting kind of clusters of concepts. There is like this ideas of the self, and then there's how language is related with movement. Also, this kind of interesting ideas of purity or impurity in relationship of the practice. The influences of Buddhism, I think, is enormous in practically everything that we're talking about. And the ideas of taking it lightly is there. And in this kind of the making of these practices, we name this cluster the practices of making, or the making of a practice. So it's like, because it seems like the doing creates the methods, and at the same time the method creates something. So in a process that is really hard to kind of detangle. So, and then that's kind of our hard call here. We are actually right now making knowledge or creating knowledge about unembodied practices, and we are definitely embodied through and mediated through this little stage. So anyway, I just wanted to frame it there because, of course, there is a lot of things, and it's not, of course, to have one answer. Is to have perhaps the multiple perspective of this thing that we have come to call choreography or dance, or making dances, okay, or just making with a formerly known dance.
Right.
Okay, so there you go. Take it away, peoples. Or if you can react to anything.
We're waiting for them to ask questions. Oh, okay, here we go.
What I would suggest too, for Lisa and for Eve, is to maybe give a little bit of context, say a bit about yourselves first.
Okay. Well, I'm Eve. I'm in Columbus. I'm helping with the Taking Place stuff and taking workshops and dancing, and I'm dancing in life because of Coco and what she's done. But as far as a question, I have a question about curiosity and interest, and how artists or anybody sort of maintains that. Like, how do you keep your energy in your interest? Like, does the interest or curiosity itself feed you, or do you have to keep reminding yourself that you're interested or curious? I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, I think there's no end to our learning. So if you're curious I'm curious about how we influence each other, and once there's no end to that. So you might at some point make something from those ideas, but it keeps, but there's no end, so there's always something else to study. There's another poem to read, there's another playwright to read, there's another body experience to try on. So all of that feeds, and it's as though you're on a path of who knows where, and every now and then you create a response. A response, I think, is a good word. A response to your investigation. So there seems to be no end. Yeah. And if you kind of come to a place where there is nothing interesting, you can sometimes just go to the library or go to a coffee shop there, listen to people. It's so amazing how people are talking now, or see what they're wearing now. You can shake yourself up, and I think that's a good thing to do.
Yeah, I think. Do you have, that's for both of us, right, Eve?
Yeah.
I was just having this conversation with myself on the way down here when I was driving, and I thought, what if they asked me why I still make dances? Like, what if this question comes up in these interviews? And I thought, like, I don't really have an answer for that, but I came up with one. So let's try this. I still make dances to find out if there will be another dance. So if I go to the dance, I go to the process of making dances to find if there's always something inside of that dance, inside of that process, that makes me want to make another one. I'm also open to the fact that one day that might not happen again. That might come from something else, but I go to the process of making dance because it's less about the dance, the thing that's going to happen, and more about having the experience with people. So inside of that, there's usually something in that experience with people that makes me want to make another dance.
Cool. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lisa, and I'm from Los Angeles originally. That's why I'm here. I'm visiting family. But I live in New York, and I'm a choreographer and a performer, and I've worked in a few pieces with Claire, I'm proud to say. And I did Meta Academy last summer and had a really great experience. I ended up actually continuing to collaborate with someone from the work that we did last summer with this platform, and it's been really interesting to continue on that with him, and we're still figuring it out and working on it. So it's been a long process, but it's been really, really amazing to work and think about collaboration at a distance and performance and embodiment. I perform and do my work in New York, and I've also lived abroad in Spain for a number of years and did work there as well and presented work and things like this. So, and I've also worked with media as well and new technology and 3D scanning.
Skater.
Oh, and I'm an ice skater, yes. Yeah, I forget about. It's so funny. I forget that I'm an ice skater.
Well, you've done it for so long.
I know. It's like my parallel life. I started skating when I was a kid, and then I met my husband in skating, and we were an ice dance team for many years and competed, and now I teach. I teach skating. That's actually how I make pretty much my living. But yeah, I love it. It's really fun. And I've also experimented. I performed with Ice Theater New York and used to experiment a lot with, movement and dance and things with on ice, and kind of doing more, kind of taking ice skating out of its context a little bit of the traditional way of looking at it. But yeah, been fun. So, I see a question. Oh my God. Well, I don't know. Let me see. Well, I agree. I don't know. I guess I'm trying to hear the words. Like, actually, Claire might be really excited about this, but I actually have been working a lot with language. I speak both Spanish and English. I grew up I'm Mexican American, so for me, I've been interested in code switching lately. I don't particularly code switch, but my family does, and I've always been interested in this sort of phenomenon of taking two languages and mixing them in the same sort of grammatical structure, and so I started to really focus on that and see how that influences movement. And so so my question, I guess, for you is, how do you cross or recombine things from one either genre or field into something of another? I don't know if that makes sense, or embody that sort of.
About sound.
It could be sound, yeah.
Different,
it could be. How do you? I know, Claire. I know how you approach it, but maybe yeah, it could be sound. It could be maybe something that comes from a theoretical or academic thing. For instance, in linguistics, there's this whole theory about language and how it's used and how it evolves in certain cultures and things like this. But how do you see that working or fitting into movement or movement patterns or maybe in daily rituals or
I play with deconstructing some language and then putting it back together, maybe with a different language, and abstracting it so it gets to be sound. And I think of it as rhythmic. What's the rhythm of it?
Rhythm.
And I also think you can gauge the levers of intensity. You have, sometimes you want the movement to be kind of the draw. Sometimes you want the sound. Sometimes you want the meaning. Sometimes you want it more of a feeling with the music. So if you have these like sound levers, you can change the intensity. So some you might want you want the movement to read, or now you transition and overlap into actual statement or a question. It could be just a plain old question, or maybe the sound reads with the movement and combining. And I think the only way to find out what you want to do is to find out what you like and play a lot.
Okay.
And try it out on people.
Well, what about people? What about other languages? Maybe a language you don't understand. Like it doesn't have to be Spanish. Maybe it's, I don't know, Russian or something. How would you play with that? If you had to.
I had in Namely Muscles, I have a poem called something about tongue, the language of tongue, and I translated a poem into Ukrainian, Spanish. You might have helped me with that.
I think I helped you.
Ukrainian and there's one I couldn't do, Chinese or something, and then sign language. So I went for help. So I wouldn't. I tried my best to speak the language.
I have a little aside about that. I feel like as far as language and codification goes, and towards Lisa's question about maybe language that you're not familiar with, is I feel like that goes back to some of the experiments that we did last summer with Nancy Stark-Smith's global underscore, and actually codifying it into sort of a visible symbology. And then, like, if you look at the symbology that John Zorn uses with his improvisations, where he holds up the visual aid that prompts the next section of things, I feel like this is very much about, like, if there is not, you know, a common language, verbal language, that there can always be an outlet for some sort of visual prompt or some sort of codification that enables the translation to happen in a different way, even if it's just being prompted by a visual inspiration that takes you into a transition, that takes you into next section. And, you know, things like the global underscore and John Zorn's structures and things like that that have been experimented with. Just, like, different kinds of scores, I think, come into play. And those are really interesting to look at as far as codification goes.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, there is like a higher question, you know, in the level of perhaps signification is actually how we create signification, you know, because then I remember I interviewed William Forsythe probably 4 years ago or something, and he said, you know, he said choreography is an organizational practice. You know, he called it is literally how we gestaltically organize things, and then, but how meaning is made there is a quite human process. You know, that there is coding, encoding, decoding, but also a linguistic can have, you know, many layers to understand the grammar as order, but also the many associative networks in which we are. So it seems like there is always this process of mapping and remapping, but also Claire point out this fundamental pattern because of rhythm. So then between rhythm and signification, there is a cultural space. You know, it's like this. When you hear a foreign language that you don't have any idea, you are literally perhaps listening to a level of just a sensorial. It's just purely sensorial because you don't have the perceptual categories or linguistic structures to put it. So, and I think that, you know, of course, it talks about what we think dance is. Of course, is part with some kind of codifications that come from trainings and all this stuff. So and anyway, I would like to see if there is a possibility of you. I like these encounters to also be an opportunity for you to ask each other some questions. So let's see if there is something that I feel that is in this encounter. There is a generational aspect that I think is really interesting. There is also the question that came out last week, and KJ was there, and she said, I don't want to talk about the kind of the aging performer, but you know, but there are things that I think are very important right now in relationship to our practices with the biological reality of aging, and also for the cultural realities of the practice.
I'd like to talk.
Can I just add that I didn't say I didn't want to talk about it, but I didn't want to talk about it.
So, yes, I'm sorry. You said that that it was quite complex. Yeah. Yeah.
You guys,
Can you reframe it again?
Excuse me. I have to get going.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I have to get going, everybody. I have to leave.
Okay.
Bye.
Good seeing
you. Bye. Good seeing you. Bye.
Bye. Okay, so take it away.
I'd like to talk about the aging performer.
Yep.
And then perhaps even, you know, if KJ is around, because perhaps I'm not recalling really well exactly, but if she feels that she can pitch, you know, that's totally proper.
You're welcome to pitch in.
Yeah, jump in if you like.
Oh, yeah, I'll leave it to you, but I have something I'll say later.
She has something to say later.
Okay, good.
Sometimes when I work with a group and I give them material and then they perform it and I look at them, the most interesting performers are the older performers. And I've wondered about that. And it seems as though it takes a while for a young person to own himself or to become. And when they're in the process of becoming, they're harder to see on stage. It's a funny thing. They're blurry, or they don't take focus. But a mature performer owns himself or herself in a clear way, and they become visible. And I find that very interesting.
Okay. You equate it with experience, the experience time-wise
Not
and the
necessarily, but
practices.
mostly. But experience, and I'm generalizing, of course, since it cannot happen, but has to do with experiencing and some kind of an acceptance or it's more than experience, it's self-education of some kind.
I think that, I think you gather experiences as you go on, and at whatever age you could come across profound experiences that train you or enlighten you to certain other ways of being. But one thing that I've come across, even myself, I remember feeling this and needing this in a lot of ways as a younger performer, the need to be looked at rather than wanting to share being seen. So I told you earlier, Deborah Hayes is very influential on me in the way that I perform and try to coach people inside of a process. And she said, inviting people, the invitation to be seen is one of the most generous things that you can do in performance. And I think that when you're younger, there's a tendency to want to be looked at, and instead of wanting to offer out. The perceptual field around you, to be seen, to be luminous and permeable, so I think that's what, as I've aged, it sounds a little self-serving, but I feel like I'm at the most nuanced place of being a performer. Maybe because I've allowed myself and I've sought out opportunities to see and to be seen in different ways, and from different locales and different perspectives and engagement levels as a performer, and even as a maker too. How do you communicate what you want to be seen, what you want to see, how you want people to feel good about being seen in this visual art form? So learning to be very clear in your communications about that, I think also then what you get back from those questions and those askings tells you a lot about what you're expecting and how you also formulate yourself in those situations.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. Well, I think that, it makes a lot of sense. One of the main things that I think that is very clear is it's a question that is that is more like it's a realization, in relationship to what the context of performance allow to do as a cultural practice. So I think that's what I think is extremely relevant, because we're talking in this process. When I read the proposal, there is this mentorship going. There is a mentorship in itself. It has it brings this idea of lineages of an experience, person who has more experience, and also it's like I think the fundamental questions is and KJ mentioned last week in a very articulate way that I have to go back to. It's like how she is in this ongoing thing that also this co-learning, this learning from the experience. And she doesn't say, like, it's not that I have this many things, this thing that I'm going to give. It's because that puts, it's almost like put you in this kind of meta-hierarchical position. So, but at the same time, there is an acknowledgement of a wise perspective in a certain way. That's what I'm noticing. That is really interesting. Without creating a sense, trying to not create a sense of hierarchy, and at the same time acknowledging that this field has evolved through many revolutions and deconstructions to be aware of the changes of life, of life itself. So there, for me, that's a very interesting question in relationship to a lot of the tension that we live in relationship with aging and other kind of segregation or other kind of differences. That's what I bring. But I think it's is out there in the making. Josephine, do you have any questions? But I would like also if you can ask questions to each other to be wrapping up.
Oh, right.
Yeah, no, I was just going to hark back on what Coco and Claire brought up with regards to sort of the aging performer, but also what you just spoke about, Marlon, in terms of just how the field itself is evolving. I feel like the meaning of dance has definitely evolved, throughout the past few years. Sort of the scope of what we mean by dance. And the languages around that. And I also feel like, for myself, to speak towards what Coco and Claire were saying too, is I feel like, what I've experienced anyway in my own life is sort of being open, learning on this constant, this constant cycle of learning, but also being open to less definition. Right, or sort of like an openness of definition, rather than sort of, rather than going for something linear and hierarchical, something more open and something flatter and something that is very, very fuzzy sometimes, right? So sort of like the projects that I've been interested in and the way that I define myself has become increasingly more blurry, to the extent that when somebody asks me what I do, I'm often totally stymied as to how to answer, and it's like a constant challenge to sort of reverbalize what that means, and also to different audiences. Like if I'm talking to somebody who's in the arts or in dance or in science, and like how to sort of frame what that means, but sort of like just a general openness to exploring outside, coloring outside the lines, so to speak, and being okay with that. Yeah, Coco.
Speaking of, sort of as you go along in your career path as an artist, as someone who makes something, it's almost like every person I come across who is currently making dances. Maybe you can speak to this, Claire, too. They don't want to make any more decisions. It's like the dance. It's like I feel like when I want to set up a series of experiences that can be performed, but I don't want to make the sort of conventional decisions that go into making a dance, a thing that has fixed corners and, all the stuff inside of it that is a dance. And I feel like that's kind of I can imagine, because I feel this way, is that the reason we don't want to make any those kinds of concrete decisions and composition along with, where we're going next, what we're researching, what's interesting us, is because at each juncture, at each place where you could make a decision, if you don't, then there's the potential of more options, right? Yeah. So it's like you just become a multi-questioner, and then find some sort of housing in your whatever you're doing, you're dancing, you're painting, you're making sound, whatever, to house those questions, those little potentialities where you refuse to make a decision.
Yeah. Are you combining judgment with decision, or are those different?
No, they're different. It's like a decision or a marker, to place a marker in space and time and say, okay, this will happen now.
Mm.
I don't necessarily want to do that all the time. And so dance making has become, like Josephine said, a little like blurry. How when we're taught in a lot of historically that dances should be fairly clear now, right?
Yeah.
I actually want to make a little adjustment to what I said. Because now, as you started talking about it, I started getting like kind of a spatial pattern in my head, and I feel like it's even maybe what I don't mean is fuzzy or blurry. Maybe I mean that there's like all these different little constellations, like this motion keeps happening. Like there's this little constellations of ideas and points, like points of light and points, these little, constellations that kind of flicker, and then they swarm together around like. Where the process sort of organically goes. So I feel like there's like this mirror, like disparate little points of light in a big constellation that kind of, come together and occasionally form stars.
Yeah, I just want to point out, I think it's extremely interesting. I have a lot of experience being working in Europe, and of course, working with you and of other different groups, and it's everything that we think about dance and choreography is based, of course, in our cultural milieu, and so it's a very interesting thing but of course, I think that one of the big strengths of this many influences of deconstructions has then choreographic practice is actually a creation of a generative field, I call it like that, this kind of generative field of action in which people behave, and that comes from a lot of the influence of the scores and rule systems and all that. But I think that, and that's fascinating, I think it's like how practically choreographers become this kind of experience facilitators, and then in which movement has a kind of a primacy. So and I think that's something to put out there, that even that's what I call the formerly known as dance, because now, for example, there is this work of Ivana Mueller that she choreographs thoughts or ideas, and it's just a tableau vivant. So I think that there is an interesting tension in relationship with the different practices. And then, what question do you have for each other?
Well, I'd like to address decisions. You talked about decisions. I'm actually going to work on deliberation and decision as an idea. So we're right in tune.
Good.
And I like to make decisions, and within say a piece I'm making, and have the decisions informed by the subject itself. And how does the subject I'm investigating decide? So it's not me deciding, but I am. But what is the subject? What does the subject have to say about structure, which will drive a decision? And what does the subject matter itself say about content, movement content, vocal content, and what's it about overall? And those are kind of, I think of those as decisions. So so that you bring that up is really interesting and opening to question. If you make a decision, it eliminates a lot,
yes,
but it also allows for a deepening into that decision. So it sometimes seems to me like decide on I'm going to go to that grocery store, for example, but I'm going to go down which aisle? I decide I'm going to go down the dairy aisle. I go down the dairy aisle, so I'm limited, but I made a decision. Then I'm going to go by the yogurt department, so I've eliminated everything but yogurt, and then I'm going to go blueberry. So I find that the narrowing in because of decisions can be very interesting, and the reverse can be very interesting. It sounds like you're really interested in the opening.
I don't know if I'm interested in it. I find that I'm not interested in that, but I'm not interested in the other. I don't know how that works, but especially in this process, I don't know if you said you're coming to the process with some language already in place, or no, you're going to come up with that based on the group you're working with.
Right.
Yeah. I don't normally have any ideas to make dances with. Like, I don't have any pre-structure, any precognition about.
So you play off the people that are there.
The people, the physicality, and then once that starts to look at me in a certain way, then I'm like, oh, this is looking like this, or this is appearing to me in this way. And that's where the option to decide on things comes. And it will generally tell me what to do, like you said, right? Like once you wipe away things, then the specifics of the idea start to kind of really define themselves for you. But I think it's because of the improvisational nature and curiosities about our process. You know, the curiosity, it's hard to lay the curiosity down out of the gate, right? Like, it's full of curiosity. You want to kind of dig and dig and dig and like churn things up and generate and everything. But after a while, it's like, okay, I can't be curious about everything right now.
Especially since your performances do.
Yeah, especially if the dance is due in 3 days.
Yeah.
So it's like, well then, okay, what, like you said, how do you come down to some very smaller kind of chunks of this thing and become intensely obsessed with those right there?
Yeah, it's interesting because no, it's great. It reminded me of I think is something perhaps about the histories of that we belong also is that in this project Motion Bank of the Forsyth Company, when they actually put in the website, when they study the score of Deborah Hay, they call it choreographies of attention and perception. So it's really interesting because then it seems like there is this practice of that acts in a very kind of cognitive level of, okay, you're going to have agency. I think it's a very important concept. You're going to have agency in this decision making, yet we will practice and we will do perhaps with some kind of focusing or opening. So, and I just kind of try to reflect that I think is quite a specific of the histories of meaning trainings also, and in the methods, this emphasis in the experience, but the experience in itself has been understood with a lot of trainings of perception and attention in relationship with movement. And then language, I think, interpenetrates everything, But I think it's an interesting thing that I see there. Any final comments that you would like to have, or any thoughts, ideas in this constellation?
Exactly.
I just had a kind of a practical question for Claire in how you. I mean, we came into this process not knowing. She still doesn't know how many people will participate in her process. I had expected a group, and I have a duet. I have two, so I had to make some like fairly large adjustments overnight to my expectations. But I was just wondering, when you're working with sound, and words, and language, and how much in your own mind are you storytelling through this process, or is it just?
I don't think of it. And there might be mini stories, but not an overall story. That's what I expect.
So threads of building stories, maybe.
So more like, I sometimes think of it as philosophical questions about something that emerge as little events within the piece, and hopefully tied together overall. See.
And when you have, how do you normally, or how do you like to spread or use language across different numbers of people? Because I think language, if you have two, I'm asking about form. I'm asking about form, actually. If you have two people and you're working sort of verbally and with certain tracks of sound or language or meaning making, that can be so different when you have sort of the size of a chorus. Or Do you prefer to work in one way or the other?
No, I think it's. I just made a piece for 28 last week, and it's actually, I think, easier than a solo or duet. I think there's just a group walking across the stage humming is so interesting. Just there's so much you can do. So it's a different challenge, I think. It's a different challenge. And
yeah, I was just wondering about, that just numbers of people speaking, people using words in relationship to one another. I was just becoming really curious about how specific or diffuse that can be and what that means in space and time.
I am curious about that too.
You are? Okay.
Yeah. You can speak one, then the other. You can speak at the same time. You could alternate. You could be quiet. You could.
And then how you carry that language in the body through the space.
There's all that.
I don't know. I can't wait. Stuff. I can't wait.
Yeah, I think that it's a good point to kind of wrap up. Because one of the things that when Rachel and I and Josephine and we were really lucky to have last year Nancy Starker-Smith with her precision, of the underscore and the histories of her curiosity in relation to so many things. Then this year we have the opportunity to work with different venues and many people. So then we are creating this umbrella of what is that thing that is choreographic thinking, or even what Susan Redford called like a choreographic mind. What is that? It's a lot of tension in many different angles. So, and I think that of course we will witness this many broad array of methodologies or ways of thinking, and at the same time we're trying to see what is meta. What is in the level of cognition? What can we get? What kind of order are we trying to find? The question with what if we really know we can detect some kind of underground structure or something, that will reveal through this process. So, meaning in what we say, it's practically what is the choreography of our own ideas? What is the ecology of all these ideas that we connect together, and where do they come from? So that's kind of what we want. So I would like to really also invite you to. This is an open dialogue, so we're trying to understand the format as we go along. And then we will have, a last dialogue. I think it's Saturday. I have to
Saturday at 10:30.
10:30. So to see what can we kind of harvest using Nancy's lexicon, in relationship to these ideas, what things are making figure for you in this process. And so I think that that's something that we would like to do for Saturday, but also we want to invite you to, we will have the sessions from Bates and Impulse Dance, so you're welcome to participate. We will have David Zambrano in dialogue perhaps with Chris Aiken, and hopefully Alva Noe, a philosopher on perception, would join us. So anyway, so we are trying to keep this in this kind of horizontal way of understanding our practice. Kind of what are we making of this practice as we make it, right? Yeah. So last thoughts, and we are ready to stop the broadcast.
Wait, do you want to see what's happening really quickly? Hang on.
Yeah, show us.
Can you see that?
Wow.
Yeah, nice. Hi.
Hold on, let me just take a picture.
Yeah. They've been doing that for like the past half hour. Y'all move it around more.
Who are they?
That is KJ, Nicole, and Delia. They've been back there for like the past half hour while we've been talking. They've been skipping around.
They're movement geeks.
Thanks for having us, Marlon. Thank you, Josephine.
Bye.
Yes, thank you.
Great conversing with you
and
guys.
We had some viewers, so this is great. All right, so thank you. So see you Saturday.
Yeah, we'll see you guys Saturday. We'll check in. Keep sending us all the info.
Okay, cool.
All right.
Bye.
Have a good day. Bye.
Stop the broadcast.